pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll open the meeting up tonight with Municipal Officers Workshop, Business and Public Hearings, the first of which is a public hearing on the extension of the Fisherman's Catch License Agreement. Bill, do you want to just give a brief overview of this for the public?
Yes, you developed a license agreement with Fisherman's Catch so that, I think it's their deck or patio that occupies some town land and some parking involved, I think as well. And it's Amy, right? You can step in when you think I'm saying something wrong. Well, this is an annual agreement that lets them occupy our property, it works good, you know, we wanna work with Fisherman's Catch. So this should be a routine matter for you. They also are working on a separate effort with Mike Livingston to, and their surveyor, they wanna propose a land swap that'll be a permanent fix, hopefully, to this, so we won't have to do license every year. It's a separate effort. They'll submit, Mike Pardue and Mike Livingston will review it, prep it for you, you'll schedule a public hearing, we'll go down that road. Leah will be involved in reviewing the deeds, or Rick Chenet at her office. So you're gonna enter into that more complicated permanent fix. Hopefully you can all break bread together, but this is just a renewal of this license agreement.
Excellent. And that's the trolley, correct?
Yeah, it's for,
Yeah, absolutely.
My name is Amy Cardinelli. The license is for the trolley area and the patio where the grease trap is, where the, used to be takeout, but now we serve out there. So that we're licensing that because I guess there's property discrepancy there. So this is just a temporary thing, and then in the future, we're working with the town to do something more permanent for that area.
Alright.
Thank you.
Anyone
We
from
have to go to town meeting, isn't it? Can we do the land swap?
Yes, yeah.
That'll have to
And
go to
that,
town
and
meeting.
she's aware of that, and that's why we're working on it now so that it's
If we
prepped
get it ready
for
for
June.
June, that would be great.
That's
yeah.
right, yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
that's our
plan.
plan.
Well, thank you, Amy. I'm just gonna open it up to public comment. Any members of the public like to speak at this time regarding this? Seeing none, any discussion from the board? Motion?
I move to approve the extension of the license agreement with Fisherman's Catch and to authorize the town manager to sign the agreement.
And to close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing as well.
All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have a public hearing on proposed changes to the harbor fees. Mike, would you like to come up and just give an overview on this one, please?
Want me to go through the prices now again?
Yes, please, that'd be excellent.
So what we did was eliminate the base. We used to have a 350 base and a 450 base for commercial. And we priced everything out. We matched Perkins Cove at $30 a foot for moorings, $35 a foot per year for floating docks. The marina's $45 a foot. Transit's $1.50 a foot per night on a mooring, $1.75 per foot per night on a float. We put in a winter dockage. I have an interest now from some of the boats from away that want to dock closer to the fishing grounds in the winter, and it works out quite well. $120 a month, and then we broke out the bay cooler and hoist so we can show it in the income lines instead of going on the base of the commercial moorings, and then it never comes. Jody's always like, where's the hoist fee? Well, it's all rolled in there, so this would break it out and make it easier. Charging for ice, which is new, because I won't add another ice machine. $2 a bucket, $7 a tote, $20 for a big Exacta, which I've discussed with everyone down there and they think it's more than fair. Pump outs remain $5 is what they were. I accidentally omitted private moorings, because I overlooked them. Those are $100 a year. We probably could go to $125 on those. They're up back where there's not dredged, 1 and 2 feet of water. They put their mooring in, they bring it in, every 2 years I inspect it, and then they put it back.
So that's not on this list, Mike?
That's the one thing I omitted by mistake.
Okay, we can add it.
We can't even know it wasn't posted.
That's right. We'd have to post that separate.
Okay,
It's a good thing you're here.
then,
Just live with it for a year and post it.
We can either process it for the next meeting. Well, we'd have to prep the scheduling of a public hearing for the next meeting.
How many are we talking?
5. So it's not a big deal. Actually, I'd like to do this tonight because the software company's waiting to plug in the new prices for the new year, so,
We can do this, but we can't add that
okay, you know,
because it wasn't advertised as part of the public hearing.
right.
So you and Mike can talk about whether you wanna come back with it in a couple of weeks and start that new process, which takes 2 meetings, or you forgo it for a year and revisit, that's up to you.
Okay, good way.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any comment from the public regarding this matter? Seeing none, do we have a motion to close public hearing?
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
All those in favor? 5-0. Discussion with the board? Anything from the board?
No, I think it makes sense. It brings us in line. It's still cheaper than some of the places, but it's gonna give us a little more revenue. And with the dredge coming up, I think it's important that we, make a little more income down there to help support the system. This goes into an enterprise fund, so all this money goes to the harbor anyway, so. So yeah, I think it's a good proposal.
Excellent. We have a motion?
I move to approve the changes to the harbor fees.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you, Mike.
So that's effective January 1,
It'll be,
well, with the new season,
well, we have some winter doggage people coming in,
okay.
so
So I don't know, I can't remember what the effective date was.
everyone's paid for last year.
Well, does it say on the notice?
No,
Maybe you should amend your motion and have an effective date.
Well, do we wanna vote? Can we get a motion for an effective date on that?
When do you want it?
Yeah,
December
That
1,
would be good, we'll have some winter doggage people coming in.
perfect.
Move to when?
Tomorrow, the second?
Okay. I move that the changes to the harbor fees become effective on November 2nd, 2022.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0. Next, for the first time this evening, we'll have open to the public for 10 minutes. We ask that each member of the public keep it to 3 minutes so everybody has a chance to speak. Would anybody like to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to current agenda items, the first of which is review and action on accounts payable and payroll warrants. Any discussion? No? Do you have a motion?
I move to approve and sign the accounts payable warrant dated November 1st, 2022 in the amount of $693,521.41, and the general assistance warrant dated November 1st, 2022 in the amount of $5,388.60.
All those in favor? 5-0. Moving on to update, discussion, and action on committees, projects, issues, purchases, and personnel. First being discussion with Howard Hall regarding workforce housing development. Mr. Hall, if you'd like to come up here and join us, it'd be great.
Come on up. This is Attorney Joseph Carlton, he's our lawyer. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Joe. What's the magic word, Joe?
qualified holder.
Qualified holder, that's what this whole meeting is about. You know what qualified holder is? Up until 5 weeks ago, I didn't either. I'm gonna make this as brief as I can, but I tend to get windy from time to time.
Thank you.
We have been going back and forth with Maine Housing for a long time. I finally got up to the top of the pile with the chairman, and he basically said, it's our way or the highway. Okay, we need you, we want you, that's $1.4 million, and maybe we'll qualify for other things you'll have so that people can get down payments and stuff like that. So we are in the process of capitulating. One of the things that they require is that we have qualified holders are the ones who are gonna run this workforce housing agreement, okay? Joe can give you a definition of a qualified holder. We had hired originally York Housing, who we paid a fee to, and they qualified people to get in there financially, okay? They're wonderful people to deal with. We went forward and asked them if they would become the qualified holder and do everything. They, I think, have agreed. We're still working on the final paperwork, but they agreed to do everything but enforcement. Okay? They refused to get into enforcement. So we need a qualified holder, and we don't have anybody else to do this. Now, if there's some outs here, it's your discretion as to whether, first of, what would happen is you would be named the Board of Selectmen, and you would designate who in the town, the planner, the engineer, whoever you wanna have do it. They have discretion not to pursue enforcement if they don't want to, okay? So it's pretty give and take, and you probably won't have any enforcement while I'm there 4 or 5 years, because I'm gonna be the enforcer. But I need a qualified
Qualified holder.
for that job, because York won't do it. So that's what we're here to ask you to do. The language is quite simple. Joe's brought the whole package with him, but there's only 2 paragraphs that apply to you at all, okay? But you have discretion not to enforce, okay? And you can change who would be the enforcing agent from day to day. That's up to you.
So what would we be enforcing, Mr. Hall? Can you define that?
We have rules and regulations, like, for example, you can't sell a house without going through us, and there may be people who do that, okay? In other words, you have to get a certificate from York Housing that your buyer qualifies, and that the sale qualifies, and the price is right. That's the whole thing. And there's formulas in the documents. It's all, you can figure it out, anybody can figure it out. We don't expect a lot of enforcement as necessary, okay? And you may never enforce, but I need somebody to satisfy the requirements of the main housing. As simple as that, okay? Joe, you can answer any questions they have. We will give you the whole document, but it's only paragraph what?
Article 9 is what,
Article 9 is where you're at.
I was interested, and that's what I was hoping the answer would be. So the town would have some control over seeing this, a lot of control over seeing this remain workforce housing.
Enforce the rules that I've made,
Yeah.
okay? And it's your choice whether to enforce them or not. Okay, so if you think, well, that's sort of borderline, and we don't wanna go to court, and you get compensated, okay, it's not an expense. We don't wanna get involved in that case, it's too borderline, so get involved, all right? Anyway, go ahead, Joe.
okay. It's all in Article 9, the range of people who can be qualified holders is very narrow. It's a nonprofit engaged in affordable housing or municipalities, and that's about it. So, there are certain things that need to be enforced. If somebody, turns their place into an Airbnb hangout, that's against the rules. It's designed as workforce housing, which means you can't go and buy it and then, make it a leased property. You have to reside there. It's workforce housing, it's owner occupied housing. Somebody's got to enforce that. And I really think that if there is no enforcement agent, sooner or later, there will be some chaos because people will begin to realize it. If there is an enforcement agent, being the town, then you're not likely to have too many difficulties. So, I don't know how many people would violate things, but if they do, they're entitled to an opportunity to be heard, and the enforcement agent can fine them. The fine is a lien recorded in the Registry of Deeds, so enforcement has some teeth. If somebody, takes money under the table and sells it to somebody, because these houses are at least $100,000 below market.
We had these houses appraised. Fair market value is $440,000 4 months ago. We're selling them for $250, okay? So there's quite an incentive to get this. What Joe was talking about is that people will buy it for the price and everything else, but they'll give them money under the table, so they're actually selling it for more. This is for people who need it, housing. It's not designed as a profit center. They can make money on it as the median family income goes up, their sales price can go up. Okay, so I think based on history, they're probably gonna get 2% a year. So at the end of 10 years, they can make 20%, okay? But it's somebody cheating on that system, is what we're concerned about. Now, I'm sure that the first one you catch will be the last one you catch, because the word will get out pretty fast. But the bottom line is, you decide whether you want to enforce it or not, okay? If you don't want to enforce it, you don't think it's worth enforcing, or whatever, you don't have to, and that's in the documents, right, Joe?
That is in the documents, it's entitled discretion and enforcement.
What would be the benefit for the town doing this?
What would be the benefit? Well, if we don't, we have no one else, and I don't get the 1,000,004. $10,000 is going to reduce the price out of that money. I'm not making any profit here at all. So $10,000 out of that is going to reduce the sales price to the buyers, because I can't give it all, because the Maine Housing wants their pound of flesh. They think that in the future, people will put electric chargers for their cars. So instead of having 10 chargers in the whole place, they want one at every one of their houses. They also want us to pre-wire the roof, so that if somebody wants to put solar panels on, they can have it. Now, that's about $6,000 out of the money they're giving me. So I'm getting, probably 80% of the money. And the rest of the money is going to the owners by reducing it. We have another plan to reduce it. We are considering building standard housing. There's 19 lots out front that we mentioned to the planning board, and I'll mention to you. We're thinking of taking them to market rate. We think we can make about at least $100,000, maybe $150,000 a house with them. We've got a nice little design that we know works. People love it. And if anybody's seen the porches over in Kennebunk that my son did, the porches number 2. So anyway, we think we can make that money. So if we get 19, call it 20 to make the math easy, and I make $100,000, that's $2 million. Now I only have 101 workforce housing units, and that would give each one of them $20,000. So reduce it. So now I got the sales price down to 220. I'm sorry, my math was wrong. So this interest rate, I have no control over. And after tomorrow afternoon at 2:30, that rate's gonna go for mortgage somewhere around 7 or 8%. I can't do anything about that. Okay, if we can get in with Maine Housing, they have, right now, their Maine Housing rate is 5%. Okay? They are scared of what we're doing because they've never seen this before. I shouldn't say are scared, that's wrong word, but they've never seen it before. They're not used to it. They're used to condominiums with 10, 15 units in the building. They're used to single-family houses, but they're not used to single-family house condominium. Okay? So, but we gotta get them on. So that's what this is all about. If you guys are not willing to do it, then we don't get Maine Housing on, we don't get the $1.4 million, and we don't get our customers, our people, to get, they give them $5,000 down payment money. They give them other stuff that's very helpful to them. So that's where I am. We don't have anyone else that we think can qualify. First of all, you gotta qualify to be a qualified holder, and very few people are qualified. you have to be a nonprofit, you're a nonprofit. And so on and so forth. I'm talking too much. But that's the basic reason. If you guys don't wanna do it, that's fine, that's up to you. It's a democracy, you can do what you want, but we won't have main housing.
I think this is a fantastic project, cause the major problem that we have is workforce housing, where workforce can't afford to live in the communities that they work in. And especially where we have so many lodging houses, hotels, that need workers that don't make, high-end money. It's hard to get affordable housing. And it seems to me like it doesn't become affordable unless he can get the 1.4 million and work with Maine Housing on a low interest rate.
Main housing is the
So-
key.
Yeah,
We
but
get main
I
housing, we're good.
fully
Right?
understand that, and so I think in order for us to help, and I think you could probably answer it, Howard, but I'll ask Joe this, because what I need to know is, and it seems that we can, because Maine Housing is saying you've either gotta be a nonprofit or a municipality. Other municipalities must have done this, and so it must be legal for them to be the enforcers. Cause that's what I'm gonna go ask our lawyer. I mentioned it to one of the board members when Council Foley said, he wanted it on the agenda. I said, we talked about, is it legal? And so we'd wanna run it by our council and probably have you chat with her, Leah Rachin at Drummond Woodson.
We're available
And-
tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
Yeah, the answer to your question is yes, it's legal for a lot of towns to do it, because they have housing authorities. Sanford, Biddeford, South Portland, Portsmouth. York,
Yeah.
York Housing is an adjunct of the town. And it makes it easier for them to do these types of things. This project is a little bit different in that it's workforce housing that is owner occupied. A lot of the other projects out there are tenant, they're rental projects for which there's a lot of federal money available.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of federal money available for workforce owner occupied housing.
Yeah.
This money came out of some federal program. It's available, we applied, and lo and behold, they said 1.4 million if we can complete the deal.
so we don't have our own housing authority.
Right.
You still think it can work through York Housing, and then we're just doing the enforcement. You think that's legal?
York Housing will do everything, but they don't wanna do enforcement.
The answer
Okay,
is,
so.
Yeah.
They've been very nice to us, they've come and accepted a few more jobs, okay? And the only thing left that they haven't accepted is the enforcement.
so the answer is yes. Certainly is legal. It's more difficult to do it this way without a housing authority, but it can be done. The housing authority finally gave us the draft of the covenants you have in front of you, their version, and after months of going back and forth, we accepted. But we still need this final piece, enforcement. Article 9, the housing authority says that the enforcement agent must sign on, and you see that at the end of the agreement. They need to sign the agreement. It gets recorded in the registry of deeds. People who make less than 120% of the median income for the area are eligible to buy. And it's permanent, it goes on forever until something.
We are the only such thing that is forever. Maine Housing is 15 years, so with all the money they put out, at the end of 15 years, they have no more say about, there's no more benefit to people who need the work, and for those, when they get ready to move out and move up, there's somebody else to come in and take their place, and it's all the same basis. I think we should be quiet, Joe.
let's just move on to some board discussion and just kinda discuss it briefly. I think we have the information. We can always ask Howard and Attorney Carlton questions, but why don't we?
Well, because they're here and they're the ones that, I wanna know why York County doesn't wanna do it.
Oh, it's York,
York,
right? Not
York, why
County.
doesn't, what, York?
I'm sorry,
Why does York not wanna do it?
they do not wanna get in the enforcement business.
Are they in the enforcement business with any of the other?
They're in the enforcement business with their own rental housing. Owner occupied housing is a little different, and of course, it's outside of the town of York.
And they're rentals and they're not sales. They, as I say, they've been very good to us. They went from being willing to do 3 things, now they're willing to do 5 things. And the only thing they're not willing to do is to do this. And somebody has to do it or we can't qualify. Yes, sir.
I have 2 questions, and one is not for you, Howard, it's for code. And I'm not even sure they know, I mean, we're already, with everything going on in town, we're already at capacity of work effort. And I just wanna know what this adds to if it's code that has to deal with this, which I assume it's going to be, what this adds to their workload. That's one of my fears.
He said it
I'm
wasn't for
asking
me.
code, I was asking code, so.
Jodine Adams, code officer. It could be substantial. When people do not want to comply, it is a lot of work for the office.
See, normally, like, and Howard knows this, he served the town for years on the planning board, but the planning board will approve a plan for development. And there may be conditions of approval related to site plan or subdivision review. But then there are condominium docs or whatever, homeowners association docs, if it's a private road, that's often the case here. We don't enforce those. Those are enforced by the homeowners association. So I like the idea, I'm just not sure we can legally. I don't know if you've heard of it, Mike,
I don't
where,
know if we legally can. I actually had the same question that
Well-
Tim had with regard to impact
If I
on the
could make a
workforce.
suggestion, if I got a census of the board, subject to legal counsel, as to whether you're willing to do this or not, and have a vote tonight. We obviously know we have to make your council satisfied, and you're not gonna do anything without the council's approval, so. We just need to get going, okay?
Now, my son Peter, when he first got out of college, he bought into a project that Howard's involved in down in Westford, Mass. And down there, it was the same thing with little cottages and they were condominiums. And they were affordable housing and he qualified but Chelmsford Housing Authority was the housing authority that did the overseeing. And Peter lived in it for 3 years before he got moved to Texas. And when he got ready to sell, he had to go back to the housing authority, Chelmsford Housing Authority, and said, I'm gonna sell my house. And they said, okay, this is what you can sell it for. And they put him in touch with the realtor, that was the price, and it worked slick. That project, he still has friends down there, that project still is working well. It satisfies the people who you want to get into these houses. And there's been very little, if any, legal action. So I mean, to me, this project is an important project for the community, for the people that we want to be able to live and grow families here. And without the support, with interest rates going up and the cost of materials, without the support of the Maine State Housing, I don't see how it becomes affordable for anybody. And we're gonna be forcing our teachers, our firefighters, our police force, our hotel workers, we're gonna be forcing them out of this town and then it just becomes another $400,000 or $500,000 house for some retiree to move into. And I just think that, you know, if we can be of benefit to helping this project by simply, I mean, if York Housing finds somebody who's violated or is trying to violate it, York Housing comes to us, this board, and says, this is what I've got. And we can say, well, we think it's worth fighting or we don't think it's worth fighting. And any cost to the town, we can get back in fines and fees. So the cost to the town can be recouped, and if there ever is one. So, I mean, and the benefit of being able to have buyers go through Maine State Housing and get the benefits of the low interest rates and the down payments, and they do some other financial stuff for them. is just a big benefit for these people. And I know that there's a couple of local families who, young families who are already looking to buy out there, but they're on the margin. With the interest rates going up, their purchasing power is going down. And with Howard saying, I'll put $10,000 and drop the price down to $240, is gonna help a lot of people be able to afford it. If he does the other project, brings it down to $230, there's another whole group of people. So, I mean, I think it's, I think it's a good project for this town, and I think it's one that, if we wanna help out the young people and the young families in this town, we ought to help it.
Tim, you said you had 2 questions, correct? You had one.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the other one now, cause I got confused there for
Oh,
a
I'm
second.
sorry.
No, it's all right. It's just my life. No, I'll think of it if I.
Did you say this is gonna be set up as a condo association?
I'm sorry?
Did you say this is going to be set up as a condo association?
It is, and 75% sold out, the condo takes over. The market rate people are going to be in the same condo. Condo rates $210, $215. You get your water, sewer, street plowed, internet, I forget the other things, but you get a number of little benefits in there that's pretty good, so it's a great deal. And they'll have no problems going in, and probably have to give them 1 vote in the association, but they'll always be outvoted. But it's, we think that it'll be older people going to these new houses, and that's great to have them in this community. So we're designing it so that this is an option for downstairs bedroom. I'm just trying to make it work. I don't wanna give anybody agita. If you don't feel good about it, then vote against it. I don't, it's not me you're hurting, it's these kids. Okay? I don't, look, I just, anyway, I'll shut up.
A question for Joe. Could we set this up kind of as a hybrid for enforcement? And I'm assuming there's gonna be a board of directors of the association. Could we have them be the kind of the gatekeeper of enforcement, enforce things themselves? And if they need to fall back on the town, then fall back, and then we could work directly with the association to deal with the issue?
No, the enforcement agent has to be a qualified holder. It's defined in state law in Title 33. And it's limited to nonprofit organizations who deal with and have experience with affordable housing, and towns, including housing authorities, but not condominium associations.
Could we designate them as our arm of enforcement unless they need to fall back on us?
Well, that's what York Housing's doing. I mean, York Housing is doing the enforcement. I mean, they're doing the review, and they will determine whether there's
I think-
enforcement issue. Then they would come to us and tell us this is the issue, and we decide whether we wanna enforce it.
That's not the way I understood it,
No, that's
though.
not the way I.
They're saying they don't want anything to do with any of that.
No.
No?
The running of the condominium association itself is the job of the condominium board. All that's involved here on the part of the town concerns the covenants, these covenants that you have in front of you. They're entirely different from the internal running of the condominium association. The covenants cover who can buy as an income limit and the details surrounding that, what do you do when you sell, what do you have to go through? It involves some limitations which are the very essence of workforce housing. In other words, you don't want to have people come in and buy and then treat it as income property and rent it out to people. You don't want to have Airbnb in there. And that is what these covenants address. They don't address the whole wide range of problems with condominium associations that you are very familiar with. And I'm familiar with too. It's a limited scope of activities which the enforcement agent for a workforce housing project is involved with. They're listed in these covenants. They have nothing to do with 100-page condominium declaration or the bylaws or the running of the association. It's completely different, even though it's a condominium, and with all of the details that come along with that, that's not part of what we're dealing with.
But it's York Housing that's gonna oversee the covenants.
York Housing is gonna oversee the covenants, and the
That's-
biggest part of that is qualifying people to be able to buy. In other words, moderate income. And there's a formula by the Federal Housing and Urban Development people that's updated yearly that determines the median household income of each area in the country. So these covenants, the only people who can buy these units are households that earn less than 120% of the median income for the Wells area.
That's not something we're determining. If we-
No,
That's
York
what-
Housing, York
that's what I'm
Housing is
trying to
So if I may, to summarize this, York Housing's actually going to do the legwork. They will administer the covenants. In the event that there was a potential issue, York Housing would then come to the town of Wells and say, we have a
The
potential.
condominium association will come to you, they also could be somebody who could come to you,
Correct, but
yes.
in the event that York Housing, after they've gotten to their point, we'll just say, yeah, they had another condominium, then, okay, we're bringing this to you, can you enforce it? That's the extent of where we would be involved.
Exactly,
To
and if you
understand
don't
that
think it's a
correctly.
meritorious case, after a hearing, you get paid for your time and you don't have to enforce it.
But they would come with any evidence, any, whatever, what you wanna call it or whatever.
There may have been a misunderstanding, whatever, but the point is, if you think it's a marginal case, you don't have to enforce it. If the language is clear, you don't have to enforce anything. You just have to be the enforcement officer.
So it gives us authority to regulate it in the sense that it remains workforce housing, and that is the end of it right there.
But wouldn't that, for the majority of the cases, be the initial purchase of the property in some resales, but situations like an Airbnb or somebody abusing the
That
situation?
is a violation, and that is something that could come to you.
Right, but that wouldn't go to York Housing.
No,
At
well,
all,
it may
it
go to
most
them, they'll
likely-
kick it to you, but
Yeah.
yeah.
My thought was if we can possibly format it so that the condo association has a stake in the game, and if there's a problem, they can fix their problem. If they need to come to the town, we can be there as the backup, but there's going to be a fee involved and it's gonna come out of their condo fees.
That may not be possible. Because Maine Housing's interpretation of workforce housing and state law is that only a qualified holder can make those decisions.
And how would the town get paid then? You say we're gonna get paid.
The town goes and enforces, then, assuming that it wins, then it's entitled to all of its expenses, its research,
Through the court.
its legwork, and that is in the covenants.
It's, the reason, I think I love the project and everything. But just to guide you a little bit, the reason it's kind of odd is that normally we enforce code violations, land use violations, state law violations. In this case, it would be the only time I know of where we would enforce restrictions that the project has on the use. Say somebody opened an accounting firm in one of them or whatever, And then what's gonna happen is that those people who live around there are gonna come to you and they're gonna find out you're the enforcement authority or codes ears or somebody, and they're gonna say, we want you to enforce this. So you still don't have to, but you're gonna be sitting there fielding the complaint. But I just want you to understand that. I'm not trying to talk you out of doing it. I think Howard's putting his case forward and it's a tough decision you've gotta make.
But in the situation you just contemplated, we would still be fielding the complaint, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there was deed restrictions in any residential neighborhood right now that restricted commercial, like a home business or something, that call's still gonna go into code.
Yes, and we would then enforce the ordinance. In this case, we'd enforce the
The word, yeah.
The covenants, that's.
the covenant.
Wait,
It's not that unusual, but it's different.
Right, one of the things you said, we would get it on the fees if we find them, or if we had a fee for, if we found that they created a problem and to correct it, we could fine them, is that, yeah, right?
Yes.
But you know, there's I wanna see that clearly written in the documents, because right now, it is really hard to be able to do that, to say, okay, you broke this, that you broke this ordinance, or you broke this whatever, and therefore,
It can become a lien. You have to go to
But
court.
as you know, Scott, in condominium associations, there is whenever a fine is assessed against a unit owner, practically your only way of enforcing it is through lien power. A lien goes on the property. You record the lien runs with the property. Okay, so you can't get out of paying by selling the property or transferring the property. Somebody who goes to buy the property, they find the lien, it has to be paid because it's an encumbrance on the property, and that takes place at the closing. People complain about it, but the lien for a condominium is good for 6 years under Maine law. We have the same provision in these covenants. The only time when you don't collect a lien with condominiums is when the unit is underwater. The first mortgagee is first in line. Aside from that, in property taxes, you always get paid, the fine is always paid. With interest.
In the covenants, it talks about the fines. You know, after notice and opportunity to be heard, the qualified holder may assess fines against the owners. And it says the qualified holder may establish a schedule of fines by rule. And then it goes down to say that the liens can be applied by the qualified holder, and if not paid within 15 days, you get 18% interest on any fine, so.
But it's a lien and we'd have to wait for the property to sell.
right,
But the only thing you're gonna be, the only thing we're gonna be enforcing is if somebody's trying to sell the property.
No,
Well,
because if
not
somebody turns it
necessarily.
into an
Not
Airbnb or something, then we're gonna go and have that fight with them.
Because it says right in Article 1, enforcement of covenants, the qualified holder enforces the covenants.
The covenants are what
But the
qualifies
covenants could
people
be-
to buy.
That's not the only covenants. They have a lot of covenants, right?
Well, there's two qualified, I gotta shut up, there's two qualified holders. One is York Housing and one would be you. You only enforce breaches of the agreement. They do everything else. So you gotta, if you wanna get at that, you have to read the whole document, but when you come out the other end, you'll find that what is it, 8, what?
Article 9 says at the beginning that the town of Wells would be the enforcement agent for Article 9. At the very end of the document, the town of Wells would sign on solely for the purpose of enforcement under Article 9. So although we've given you all of the other many pages in these covenants, the only section that applies to the town of Wells would be Article 9. And you look at the end and you see what the town of Wells as an additional qualified holder agrees to do. And that is what the town would be agreeing to do.
Jodine, did you have something you'd like to contribute?
Yes, respectfully, we don't have the ability to impose fines on anybody. That has to be done by a judgment.
Not true with private covenants.
Yeah, they described the lien process. The town would have the right to lien, and that's your enforcement. And you'd fine through the lien.
Jodine?
The other issue is, when you talk about somebody starting a business, if that business is allowed in the zoning ordinance, then we allow it to happen. The condo association has to enforce its own bylaws. The town does not do that for them.
And that would not change.
I would
I'm not opposed to this, but I'd love to see us figure out a way to work with the condo association, let them be our designee to enforce
Jody.
their own rules. If there's a fine to be levied, let's levy the fine against the condo association and let them put the lien on the property itself and go chase the money later. But I don't wanna be chasing money forever. I don't have any idea how code would
Right.
possibly chase down these issues. Let the condo association have a stake in the game, clean up their own mess if there's a problem. And if there's a mess they can't handle, then come back to us and we'll deal with it. But they're gonna have to pay for it.
I have an interest in seeing us have enforcement authority specifically relating to, and I understand if there's other caveats that are involved in it, but specifically related to the maintaining as workforce housing. The number one concern I've seen about this project online is just the skepticism surrounding that it stays that way moving forward in the future, obviously, and I know that Howard addressed that briefly as sort of his concerns too, but I know a lot of people in the community are concerned about that. Now, if the community entered into that, as stakeholders, they entered into that as the enforcement authority, I think that might make some people feel a little bit better about it. And I also think down the road, it's gonna help people, obviously, younger people, be able to stay in the area, help support the businesses in the area, which we know have a serious staffing issue right now, so.
Right. I think that having us make a decision one way or the other tonight is way too early until we have a lot more information and actual talk to our legal people and find out for sure exactly what we're gonna be tied into. And just because we're looking at that, we really need the workforce. None of us want to not have it happen. I think, but those people that are buying up there, we'd like to help them, but we have to also represent the rest of the town. So that you're not hooked on something that 5 or 10 years down the line, all of a sudden we've got 200 houses that are ready to be resold and everybody wants to make a heck of a lot more than 20% on it.
They are required, if they want us, all 100 of them wanna sell it the same day, all right, they can do that. They have to get a certificate from York Housing that says that their sale and the sales price is in compliance with the document. And if they don't have that, any sale is void. Not voidable, void, like it never happened. So it all goes through Maine Housing, not through you. Do you understand it's your choice whether to enforce anything or not? If you choose not to enforce anything, that's your choice. But we have someone called, what's the name of the thing again?
Qualified holders.
We have a qualified holder who's in charge of enforcement. I don't care if you enforce anything, that's up to you, and we clearly gave you that, I'm raising my voice.
No, wait a minute, I have one, okay, I just want a clarification because what John is concerned about is that we keep it at affordable housing, and that is gonna be very hard to do. But if you're telling me that York is able to do this,
York is able to do that.
if they're gonna be doing that
They will
part
do
of
it.
it,
They're in charge
then what are we?
of, if you, just like Mr. Foley said, when his son wanted to sell,
Mhm.
he got in touch with the qualified holder out of Massachusetts, which was the Chelmsford Housing Authority. And they said, look, I wanna sell my house. And they said, this is what you can sell it for. Okay, he listed it with a broker, that's what he sold it for. I don't know what certificates they required, just because I did that project, I didn't have the interest I have in this one. But he went through it, he sold his house, it works. Okay, and it remains.
I think we're talking about two different things
Yeah.
here, because I
That's
think
separate.
we have the qualified holder already in place to keep this affordable housing, or workforce
That's all
housing.
set.
That's a done deal, it's a done deal.
Right.
We're trying to decide tonight, John, your thing is already done.
Yeah,
So
That's
that's
what
not
I'm
what we're trying to figure out what the qualified holder, what our responsibilities are. Our responsibilities are not to keep that workforce housing, our responsibilities is to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Make sure there's no
In-
violation.
There's violations of things, so that's what we have
Of the use of a building or somebody
two
starts
different
putting up a
things going,
statue.
it's not the same thing.
It definitely is not the
Right.
same thing, it's totally different.
Right.
You have one simple task, York Housing does everything else.
Just to explain a little bit more about what your concern is. Somebody wants to buy a unit in this place. they are vetted by York Housing. In other words, they have to fill out an application, they check their assets and their income to make sure that their income falls below the maximum amount. York Housing then says, okay, you're what's called an eligible buyer. You can buy the unit. You're eligible to buy the unit. So if these folks go and buy the unit, at the closing, before the closing, York Housing will issue what's called a transfer certificate. The covenants say, and the deed will say, that no deed transferring title to a unit is effective unless it's accompanied by a transfer certificate signed by York Housing saying that the purchase price is okay, the buyer is within the income limits, otherwise the deed is void. So that is, one aspect of enforcement of the covenants, to make sure that only moderate income people can buy these units.
But that's not what you're asking us to do.
No,
But
we're
that's-
not.
So
But
can we just
that's-
get to
We
what
need to
we're
put that
wanting to know, right?
aside.
Yes, I wanna know what we have to do.
Yeah,
I
what
don't
does
wanna
it-
know what.
Okay, I was just explaining what York Housing does, but it has nothing to do with what you are being asked to do.
If there's a
That's correct.
complaint brought to your attention about a violation, okay? You can hold a public hearing for which the individual pays for. Not only the hearing itself, but the time. Somebody from this town does it. And they'll hear it. After you hear it, it's then your decision whether to enforce or not. And if you don't want to enforce, then you don't enforce.
And if you do want to, I think it should be the board, not codes or planning.
Well, you can make it,
Let me
you can make it
finish.
whoever you want to make it.
Let me finish. If someone came to you and said, my neighbors are doing this in their unit, you need to enforce the rules. And if you did decide to enforce, you would instruct Mike and Leah to place a lien on the property with the fines and the 18% and whatever. That's what you would do. That's your enforcement. That's the only tool that you'd have. You don't have to do anything else. You place the lien or not. So that's all you'd have to do. I don't know how often it's gonna be.
So that would give us control over Airbnbs though, which we're discussing
Yeah.
now, having,
Airbnbs and other things will happen.
well, I know, but that's just a big concern.
Somebody will start running a landscaping business out of there. And they're gonna come and say, what the heck, this is not allowed in this association, and they're gonna want you to enforce it. And you're gonna decide whether or not to levy fines, and that's through a lien process. That as long as it sells within 6 years or so, it sounds like, they would end up paying the town. Do you agree with that, the way I think it would work, Mike?
I agree with how you're outlining it. I would love for Leah to weigh in on this.
Oh, yeah.
Just to give us, it's kind of unique enforcing what I would consider private covenants, although it's a little bit different. And you talk about maybe a daycare center opening up or something like that. Those are the types of things that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Although conceptually, I agree with Mr. Foley. Absolutely wonderful idea to bring our young people here to support our businesses. But I'd love to have Leah's weigh in on it.
Yes, your lawyer will have to weigh in, but actually the example you just gave is within, that doesn't have anything to do with these covenants. If it violates the condo docs, the condo association would enforce it. If it violates the town code, why then the town naturally would enforce it, but that would not necessarily violate these covenants.
And it wouldn't necessarily what I'm describing might not violate the town code. So maybe you need to tell us what violations the board would have to deal with. What violations are they? So that,
I can do that if you want.
Yeah, I'm still a little, I'm still a little foggy, to be honest with you, about what it is we're actually being asked to do. I understand that it's an option to not do anything, but I think some more time with the documents, maybe highlight what our actual obligations would be, I think would be helpful, and then get Leah to look at it. That'd be my Again, I'm not opposed to it personally, but I just want more information.
You aren't gonna be satisfied until you talk with Leah anyway, and I can discuss it with her, she's a very good lawyer. She undoubtedly is familiar with this stuff, and she can advise you about it. I'm really confident that this works.
It's just Article 5, that's just where the covenants are.
Article
No.
Well, 9, okay.
Article 9.
May I ask also, Joe, is there a municipal
stuff in
model
5.
similar to this anywhere that you're familiar with?
No,
Okay.
no, this is,
This document, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars drafting, and it does not exist anywhere else in the state of Maine for sure.
Sure.
Because this is a unique product. It's a single-family condominium.
Correct.
There ain't many of them.
Really?
But we had to do it that way because in order to get the units on the land, you had to make it a condominium. If we tried to go in and make individual lots, we could get maybe 15 houses.
So, but Article 9 only describes and contemplates the actual enforcement actions from what I'm reading here. Again, I guess I'm confused, what is actually outlined as the, Article 5 started listing covenants, are those the covenants that are alluded to in Article 9? Or am I misreading the document, because I didn't see anything enumerated, and I'm not trying to grill you, I'm really trying to understand this.
okay, look, if you have a few minutes, I will go through and talk about them.
If you, yeah, and I mean, just for the sake of keeping the meeting, I don't think we're gonna make a decision tonight by the sounds of it, but if we had, like I said, I'd just like that highlighted.
You summarize those, Joe,
Yes,
and send the whole document to Leah and a summary of the possible violations so the board could clearly understand, oh, if somebody does X, then we might do an enforcement.
So if the town agrees to do this, it doesn't have to be the Board of Selectmen that are the
That's
enforcers.
You can designate anybody you want.
So could we just designate the Board of Directors of the condominium association?
No, they have to,
They're not gonna allow
they have to be within that thing. You'd have to designate the code enforcement officer, the planner director, the town engineer.
well, not necessarily the town has to be the ultimate decision maker, but the town could say, we wanna have the recommendations of A, B, and C.
They could ask for that.
Yeah.
But you're the only ones who can place a lien.
No, I
So-
understand that, I just want there to be a mechanism whereby they're looking after themselves. So if we can form a committee based on the board of members of this association, and then they can come back to us if there's an issue, but I mean, to tie this room up, to tie that office up with,
I wouldn't even touch that office.
who's gonna do it?
You are. So listen, you wouldn't, I don't think you'd form a board or anything. People are angry because somebody's doing X in one of the units. And they look at the documents and they figure out, oh, we've gotta go to the town and complain. They'd come to the town and you would be then judging whether or not the violation was worth enforcing or not. The board, whoever's on the board at the time would be on the spot because they're gonna be saying, they violated these condo, whatever he's gonna give us for a summary. And we want you to enforce it. If you're comfortable doing that, then you can move forward. I wouldn't do it tonight, we've got some homework to do.
Bill, what would you envision being the investigative arm of an allegation?
Well, I think, say 4 residents came and they said, owner of unit 81 is really being a bad actor. And they'd come to the board and complain, the board might say, they might look to Jodine or someone, or they'd probably look to the manager and then you designate who it would be. Look into this and see.
Or you could contract that service out
You-
to look
you
into
could,
it
in theory.
and recover that fee and not put the burden over on our personal.
Yeah, I think if you just dump it on codes, here we go again. We can't
Yeah,
handle
we
what we have. They need more staff now. We can't give it to them.
Which is why we should be very careful about what we enter into here.
But you do get paid. So even if they don't have time to do it, that's one matter, but if they do it, they get compensated, so. Anyway, I think I hear what you wanna do. We would need to back up go out, make up some of these, say, charts or whatever it is, we need to talk to your town council. And is there anybody here who doesn't wanna do it under any circumstance?
Well, I'm very near that.
I'm sorry?
I am very near that. So, yes, I'm very near that. Why would we even do this? Why, I'm just wondering, I wanna see what the repercussions are, what the direction is for what responsibility we have for enforcing. Right, I wanna see all that first, because right now I see no benefit except
The
we look
benefits
at,
of the benefits of the town is that you help workforce housing.
I'm not,
I know you
right.
represent everybody in this town.
No, I know,
If
and
you wanna
everybody
say
wants
no,
to, yeah,
then this will be an almost impossible task for us to do.
I understand.
And I have, these kids who want, it's time for me to go. I'm not a good public speaker, and I will go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Howard.
Welcome to,
Thank you.
I understand you
Nice
did
to
a
meet
great
you.
job over in the.
Yeah, Attorney Carl,
Thank you.
just to be
It's
clear,
kind
just
of
if you
Take care.
even provide, just the articles I can go through, I understand what to say, like I said, but as far as Article 9 is concerned, that's where I'm getting hung up personally. I'm not a solid no, I just need more information. I know it's in here, I just wanna know what I'm reading as far as, like, we're seeing sale only to eligible buyers, for example, and sale price limits under Article 5. It goes through home occupations, improvements, things like that, and then it goes over into 6 for the determination of maximum resale price. As far as, some of those I assume is going to be what would potentially be under our enforcement authority. That's the sort of stuff that I'd be looking for, just to be able.
Understand. I think the major thing will be section 5.3, owner occupancy, leasing. The provisions about sale only to people who qualify is pretty tight. You can't give a deed to anybody who is not an eligible buyer, and if you try to, the deed says it's void.
Right,
And
but that's not something we would be,
That's not within your purview,
Right.
but that's the question that I think some of you do
Right.
have.
yeah.
So I will be glad to talk with your attorney, and I think she can get you more comfortable with this.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have that electronically, that document.
I can send it to you electronically.
Thank you.
That's fine, you just send it to Bill or whomever.
Okay,
I'll catch it.
electronic copy. Leah may wanna see the condo docs too, I can send those electronically. Really anything you want.
Thanks so much.
Great. Well, moving on. We have a presentation for the first quarter financial report for FY 23. Jody. You stay at the podium, or you can come sit up here in the chair with us, whatever you prefer.
Here's fine.
Okay.
Jody Sanborn, Finance Director. I'll keep it real brief for you. So, first quarter is July, August, September. Through first quarter, the balance sheet position is down 9.8 million. That is due in part, taxes are committed in October. Our fiscal year starts in July. That's the summer period. We have a lot of staffing, a lot of stuff going on, so we're using money that we've collected in June from the prior fiscal year to carry us through until we commit our taxes in October and start bringing in revenue. So you'll see that, usually we see that in quarter one, and we'll see it again in quarter three. We have capital and special reserves have gone up because we added our CIP funding to those, so that's expected. Beach Enterprise is up because continued beach sticker sales. The beach meters we're collecting, those are the prime months, July and August, that we're collecting. And then Rec Enterprise is down. We collected our summer program revenue in quarter four. And then all their expenses hit like in July, because programs start the end of June, carry through till July and August. some big revenue collections. We are at 7.3% collected. In our budgeting cycle, we expect by quarter one, we'd be at 25%. But again, it all relates back to the collection of taxes. So that 7.3 is on target to what we traditionally run about at this quarter one. We do have some departments that are exceeding the 25%. Those are, they are the police department, planning, code enforcement, transfer station, and library. So they brought in more revenue than we've expected at this time. And the budget does show that we are for $40.8 million below budget at this point, because again, all related to taxes. With our operations side, we are at 28.4, and we expect to be at 25% expended. I'm sorry, and let's see. And then we have departments that are significantly below the 25%. The select board, your budget's very small, but you don't use, basically your budget is your stipend that comes out in December, so we won't see spending in there. The Conservation Commission is below spending. EMA is civil defense. That's pretty much used when we have an emergency or things like that. The Activity Center and warrant articles are all below 25. And then you will notice that we do have some departments that are over 50%. These are grants, so grants are outside services. We helped like York County Community Action and things like that. They all like to have their grant funding in July. So those are pretty much paid out. The Information Center, they want their money in first quarter. We've also spent some money for employee benefits, insurance. We're paying our general liability in first quarter. We used to phase it out. Now we just pay it all at once. And then the capital outlay that's proposed, because we added that money to the special reserves. So that's at 100%. So overall, we are on track. And you'll see in the first quarter, overall, we do have some departments that are at 50% expended. Big thing is at my harbor. We haven't collected the marina revenue and the restaurant revenue. Those are the biggest revenues because, as you know, the mooring revenue is going into a special reserve, so it's not hitting taxation. And that's pretty much it. And I'll welcome any questions.
Any questions for Jody?
Thank you for doing this.
No problem.
Work as always.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Everything you do.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to,
It's your birthday? Hey, you guys know it's her birthday?
no, but happy birthday.
She chose to spend her birthday day with you guys.
What a place to be. Yeah.
More cupcakes.
Next, we'll move on to discussion and action on authorizing the tax collector to accept prepayment of taxes not yet committed for FY '24.
I'll take it.
Joe, this is new, isn't it?
No. We ask you every year.
Every year you ask us.
I have taxpayers already wanting to pay towards FY '24 taxes, and I can't do that unless you authorize me to do that. It will really come into play when we get closer to April 1, because anything that's on site April 1, if they're demoing it, they have to prepay for what that structure is before they can remove it, but we do have people questioning it already.
Excellent. Any discussion from the board on that one? I get a motion?
I move to authorize the tax collector to accept the prepayment of taxes not yet committed for fiscal year '24.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0. Move on to discussion and action on the acceptance of Grand Trail Drive as a town way as approved at the June 14th, 2022 annual town meeting. Mike, you want to kick us off on this one?
Yes, this is a rare occurrence where we actually have a road that was part of a subdivision that qualifies by ordinance to become a town road. The developer went through that process last year, got it on the town ballot for the June town meeting. The voters accepted that and passed the article that was on the town warrant for vote. The town warrant stated that the road would be accepted once the Board of Selectmen found that it meets sections of 201-16, 201-22, and 201-37, which are the town ordinances that govern the requirements for submittal for accepting a town road. In your packets, I had updated a memo from September on some last items that needed to be submitted. I updated that memo just last Thursday, and I have an update to that update. So there were a couple of highlighted sections in my memo where we were waiting for the town attorney review and recommendation, and in your packet, I think that made it in your packet on Thursday or Friday, and the town attorney has reviewed the proposed deed, the bond requirement, and the other documentation supplied, and found them all to be positive as far as meeting the town ordinance. The only other highlighted item I had in my memo was additional escrow funding to be provided to the town to cover those legal expenses, and that was provided on Friday. All the as-built plan requirements and other documentation that I listed in the original September memo have also been satisfied. So the last part of this process for the town to accept the road is for the Board of Selectmen to vote to state that the requirements of those sections in Ordinance 201 under streets has been met. And once you take that vote and accept the road, the owner, the fee interest owner of the road still has to sign the deed and get it recorded before it's an actual public way. So there's one final step, but that's on them versus the town or the board.
Great. Any questions from the board?
Good job. Good job.
Great, thank you. Move motion.
I move that the requirements of chapter 201, sections 201-16, 201-22, and 201-37 have been satisfied, and Grand Trail Drive is accepted as a town way upon recording of the deed and reimbursement of the town legal expenses by the Daniel Chase Family Real Estate Trust.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have discussion of open enrollment periods for committee members. So this was one I know that I've asked Bill and I brought up a couple of times, discussed briefly, sort of, I don't know if open enrollment's the right word, but just basically getting some definition on some of the committees. We have a lot of committees in town, and it just seems some will just fly in or whatever, there's an opening. I understand it's advertised on the website, but there's always the person, well, I didn't realize there was an opening or whatever, so just trying to get it done in a fashion where, most people know that, okay, well, they're gonna take these applications, obviously. If there was a vacancy or something that needed to be contemplated, we could, but that was sort of just.
It's also very difficult for Rebecca to manage, that it's constantly on the fly. People are, all these various committees, and there might be a vacancy, might not. People are sending in applications. Sometimes there is no vacancy, but it just is constantly ongoing 12 months a year, and I think it's difficult to manage. Also, one thing that we're always cautious about, and I'm sure you are, is that no one's trying to load up a committee at a certain time, before something interesting is gonna happen. That kind of, there's some politics in there. Yeah, we none of us talk about it, but so the way I picture this, and I think you ought to hear from Rebecca too, but the way I picture this is that you control it. Some committees, and I think a little research needs to be done, like the budget committee has something in the charter that says they always have to have 2 alternates. And so you can tell when they were drafting the charter, they were a little nervous. What if there's not enough people on the budget committee? But most of the committees, I think the large number of them, it doesn't really matter. You can be short a couple, 3 people, and it's no big deal. You ran into with the WEMS board recently and with the Harbor Commission. You had some vacancies that you had business to do, so you needed to get done. So there's gonna have to be a basic policy that says which committees can you, are routinely accepted from open enrollment. And then you still probably should have something that if you wanna waive the open enrollment to get it to populate a committee that you're creating or whatever, the board should leave itself some latitude, but generally speaking, you'd have two or four or three open enrollment periods. So I think it's a policy that Rebecca could maybe start to do some of the legwork and then bring it to Mike, and they might even need Leah involved because it does deal with some charter stuff.
Some of the committees, probably like you said, the budget committee, there are some of the ones that have to have a little more restriction, or they say WEMS, a specific time frame.
But how is it gonna work if we got staggered terms?
Yeah,
Right, there are, it goes January, March, April, June, the whole year.
But different years, I
Has
mean,
staggered terms, years are staggered. I like the idea of having maybe multiple open enrollments a year. I think that may take some of the burden off of doing interviews every single meeting, or we could have, the first meeting of every month. That way it's just a little easier to coordinate. I'm happy to work on drafting some kind of policy. Of course, I'll work with Mike on
I
that.
think I'd like to see it. I mean, I'm just trying to envision, because a lot of times people, they resign. I mean, Bob LaVoy's resigning tonight, so now we have to fill that position. So what you're saying is you'd have a pool of candidates
Right.
that's already been signed up, and you just go to that pool
And pull those interviewees. And there are some, like the Shellfish Committee or the one that we recently had where, they've got 2 members left, they have something they need to vote on, they need more than 2 members, and that's would be an exception. And same with the Budget Committee that has to be filled. So I don't think it would be a perfect policy, but it would be something that we could fall back on.
You might find it doesn't work, but take a crack at drafting, and I think there's a chance it would work and it would organize things better, and it may have to be once a month, the first.
I was just gonna say, if you had just the first meeting of every month,
Yeah.
that's the only time we're gonna deal with the applications. That mean, at least there's a movement every month in case somebody falls off or decides to quit or retire or whatever they wanna do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes it easier for you guys too.
At least when we won't be doing this.
But
Yeah.
I think drafting a policy, it avoids what we just went through with someone who came in earlier, that there was, they had their document, but it needs to be summarized before it comes to the board. And that's one of the things town managers try to do, is we try to package things so that it's not all confusion when it gets to you. And that's what we would try to do with this policy, and then you can either adopt it or change it or decide that it doesn't work for you.
Yeah, well, like the WEMS one, for example, that was always very consistent prior, that we knew that we had those 2 periods. I liked that. For me, it's not about political tomfoolery. I'm glad you brought that up. But it's just getting some consistency in there and streamlining the process that I'm interested in seeing, so everybody knows what to expect. People know, okay, this is gonna be open then, or here's a reappointment, just whatever. Right now, again, it's not all of them. Some of them are very clearly defined, but there are others, it's just, one comes in and it's like, I don't know, it's just all willy-nilly, it seems like, to me anyway, that's my perspective.
And there's so many too.
Yeah, there's a lot of committees.
Are the vacancies listed, are they updated and listed on the website? So if someone wanted to say, gee, I wanna volunteer for something in the town of Wells, and they can scroll down through. Yeah, so, and they're updated all the time, so when we see people come in, they've probably seen that. Okay, but you've got a log of a backup?
Log everything.
Okay, no, you've got people that are in waiting to be appointed to
There's
some?
some committees,
Yeah.
some that are more popular.
Yeah.
I'll have 4 or 5 applications for. Others, like Rec Committee right now has 2 vacancies. I have nothing's been coming in, so it just depends.
Yeah, okay,
I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah,
I mean, as a
definitely.
policy,
yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Great.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to discussion and action on action on updates, personnel, and committee assignments, resignations, and issues. The first of which, a resignation of Robert Lavoy from the Zoning Board of Appeals, effective November 1st.
I move to accept the resignation and write a letter of thanks for his service.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0. Next, we have discussion and action to accept donations and bequests. The first is a $10,000 donation from the Wells Beach Hose Company to the town of Wells for the Fuel Assistance Program Fund.
I move to accept the generous donations and write a letter of thanks to the donors.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0, that's substantial, thank you very much.
Yes, this needed this year.
Yes, certainly. Now we have a discussion and action on approving the minutes of the October 18th, 2022 Selectmen's Meeting. Everything look good to everybody? Do you have a motion? Yeah, Scott?
Looks like, all good.
Yeah, we're never gonna forget
I
that.
know.
I move for approval of the October 18th, 2022 Selectmen Meeting Minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0. Moving on to open to the public for the second time this evening, we have 10 minutes set aside for public comment. If you have something that you'd like to put out there, just come to the podium, state your name, try to keep to 3 minutes.
Rebecca
I
has a
have
couple.
2 online comments,
Alright.
and they're in reference to what we just heard about the housing issues. There are 2 questions. I don't think he expects answers, but I think it can at least kind of highlight what the public is thinking about right now. So the first is in regards to property values. So this is from Kevin Cerrone. He says, has anyone looked into how this type of development will affect area property values? Curious how selling a condo or house that's worth $400K for a fraction of the price might negatively impact residents. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly. So, second question also from Kevin, and he said, is York Housing a qualified holder in regards to enforcement for any other housing project in the area?
Yeah, and yes, I think that the answer to that was, yes, they are, just not of this type.
But they're rental
Right.
units,
Yeah,
not
this is
ownership.
yeah, right, exactly.
And apparently the board didn't feel comfortable moving forward in this project where it's owned. But I
Plus,
think,
it's just within their town too.
yeah, and clearly, the person making the proposal has to bring you back some more solid, concise information. And I think hopefully they left with that.
As far as property values, I assume that would be a question about comps in the area, if things were being
Right.
sold. I'd be interested to know the question, I live up there, but.
Well, I think it would affect property values.
I think when they do property values, they take out
Right,
affordable housing
right. If we were, if,
out of the
right.
comps.
You would know that, yeah.
If I was in the assessor's office and I was looking at them, that would be an unqualified sale
I see.
to compare to an open market fair value.
So that's a good answer for you.
Yeah.
Great answer, Kathy.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else on there?
No, that was it, just those 2 questions.
Okay, excellent. Anybody in the room? No, chief? No? I'm just picking on you.
I'll say one thing.
Alright, absolutely.
Halloween went very well last night, uneventful, but kids had a great time. I know there were pictures of my officers with some of the kids out trick or treating and I actually got a comment from the supervisor that was on last night that it was one of the most fun Halloweens they've had out interacting with the public, so, and they were everywhere. There were kids everywhere. But, we have those concentrated places like, the Wells Islands, Canterbury
Yeah.
Manor, and all
Jeremy
those
Cost,
places. But, it was great, no issues from what I understand, and everybody seemed to have a great time, so it was good.
That was really good, thank you.
Excellent. We went over to Summer Street, Kennybunk.
Okay.
Oh, that's where you got over there though, right?
Yeah, we
'cause
did, yeah.
That was unbelievable.
They were halfway through it by the time I got there, yeah, but I had a hard
Oh.
time catching up. But yeah, it was something to see.
Yeah,
They go all
It was a
out.
good time over
they
there.
closed down the street, didn't they?
Yeah, we've gone.
They do that over
Did you say
to
3,000
Spice
people?
Bush,
Yeah.
right, Highlands, I mean, they really play that up, it's really,
And it's fun when the homeowners get involved and they do decorate, it was great, and in Wells Islands is one of the
Yep.
Very busy place to be on Halloween. And the homeowners take, a big ownership in that and decorate and just, they scare kids too, that's what it's up there, have fun. So it was good, it was a good night for everybody.
was too bad was the recreation,
Haunted Hayride.
was that good?
Haunted Hayride.
Yeah,
That was.
Couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I know, but-
20.
but I didn't hear anything.
And that, from what I understand, that was a huge success.
oh, good,
I know, my secretary took her daughter and they thought it was great.
Oh, good.
So when the scenes out in the thing, I don't know if anybody else had a chance to go. They
I
said
checked in
it
with
was-
Tina and she said it was fantastic. They,
Oh, good.
everything
It
worked
was a good
just
night
like they
too,
wanted.
yep,
It was
it
a
was,
gorgeous
yeah.
night.
I'm liking the positive vibe, so why don't we just move right on to good news and keep it
And
going?
then go to Coach Roach.
Yeah, you must have something for us, huh?
I have good news, I mean, I'll let Bill go first, he looks like he's all keyed up.
Well, there's a letter from Jeffrey Cousino to the chief of police, thanking them. They've lived here for many years and for making it such a comfortable city. They also had a rental car or someone visiting them, and they got locked out, and they called, and Officer Shaw showed up, and they were very happy with, what's that? Did you already see it?
No, yeah, I'm just thinking of the Adam Shaw showing up. Imagine it's a hoot.
Yeah, well, they're just so happy with our police department, and we get these kind of compliments. I don't share them all, I usually send them along, but I don't read them at every meeting, so you do see them, and it's amazing the amount of compliments we get for staff. We had one for the library a couple of months ago, a real nice letter. There's also one here from Mrs. Alini Parsis from 2292 Post Road, saying that we're just so proud of all the workers here. They're great to us, and we thank you all and wish you a happy winter and happy holidays. That's what I have.
Excellent, well, no, that's excellent. We are very blessed here in Wells, we do have great staff. The taxpayers are very fortunate for that. So everybody does such an excellent job and very dedicated.
It's an odd spot, but I did want to mention also that we are working on the application, working with MRI on the application for the SAFER grant. And they make a little money to fill out the application, we pay them through the operating budget, but, so that's moving on, and in theory, if we get a grant at some point, that would fund, some personnel at the fire department for a number of times. You're not accepting the grant, you're applying.
Is this an appropriate time to ask for, where's the contract with WEMS?
I know Mike actually might even be better than me.
Greg M and I are having a conversation tomorrow, I believe. I had a couple of questions about it just for clarification. I think we're almost there after that.
Oh, good.
I provided my input a few weeks ago, and so now it's kind of transitioning so that you'll be fully informed by Mike as it moves along.
I'm moving it.
Great.
Do I get to go with my good news now, John?
Love to hear it,
I
yeah,
don't know
love to
where
hear
we're
it.
at. I laughed when Bob said it, I was thinking about Adam, my guess is it took him 5 minutes to unlock the car, and then 3 hours later, he finally left.
A social event.
And I love him, I don't mean that.
This is always the best.
A couple of things, one is, you know, Joanne and I know Mike and some of John and everybody, we were over at the school yesterday, you know, they were able to get a grant for 4.3 million for electric buses, which is gonna be a big savings to town and school department, so that was a pretty cool event, attended by a lot of people, and that was pretty nice. Before I get to football, I wanna thank Joanne, just right before I got here, I went into Cumberland Farms to get my coffee, and I saw a handicapped man, he was trying to get in his bag, and I went over and I said, do you need help? Nope. And I said, okay, and I went back in, I came back out, he was still trying to get his bag, I said, you sure you don't need something, like, it just helped me, I just wanna help you. And I started talking to him, he told me he was a vet, he'd lost his leg, and he was hitchhiking through town in his wheelchair, and I was like heartbroken by this, I said, well, and I don't mean this to sound good to me, I was trying to give him money, he wouldn't take money, he wouldn't take food, I said, let me go in and just buy a bunch of food and put it in your bag. Nope, I don't want him, he goes, if you just had some, I thought I could stay in this Cumberland Farms overnight and then start hitchhiking again tomorrow, but they're closing, and he said, well, I'll just go, I said, well, the police station's right over here, let me call the chief. And he said, well, I'll just stay in the lobby. I said, I don't think they're gonna let you stay in the lobby, but I said, I bet you they have a voucher for you that you could, and so that, it got comical, cause I'm wheeling him across Route 1, people are beeping him up. It got a little different, but I wanna compliment Joanne, because right away, as the minute I called, and I don't know how it turned out, but she was like, get him over here and we'll, I mean, it was immediate response, and I just wanna say I appreciate it, because I think when you see this, you don't realize how much our town does help people, and I just wanna say thanks to Joanne and whoever else helped us with that, because you know, I think he was very appreciative, at least he was when I was there, and seemed like a good guy, but. And last, if you're interested in the football game, it is 6 o'clock, Friday night against Cape Elizabeth, so, and it's a second round of the playoffs, so. And anytime you can beat, no offense, Mike, Kennybunk and York in the same.
I'm working here.
All right. You know where the paycheck's coming from. Anytime you can beat Kennybunk and York in the same year, it's a great year.
We're red and black on Monday morning, will that be
Yeah,
appropriate?
you'll be all right, yeah.
And it's a home game.
It's a whole game, sorry, yeah, thanks.
Very exciting.
It starts at 6 then?
It does, it's an earlier start, yeah.
Anything from the rest of the board? Well, seeing none, we move on to our next item is an executive session to discuss the applicants to various committees pursuant to 1 MRS 4056A. We have a motion.
I move to go into executive session to discuss the applicants to various boards and committees pursuant to 1 MRS 4056A.
Second.
All those in favor? Great, 5-0. We're in. We'll
Can we stop the paperwork around?